the people with the backwards attitude, pointing fingers, and that's a bad excuse for sitting on your ass when you complain. It's two things that you don't want to change. You ain't got no time for me, and I ain't got no sympathy for you.
These bombs with the maker's name on the bomb, and whether it's phosphorus, from the U.S. showing up all over these war zones or here in Yemen, this has been kind of known for quite some time. The U.S. and the U.K. are arms dealers, so those arms are going to show up somewhere.
So overseas, we have these arms dealers and this horrifying graphic. In New Haven, Connecticut, we have drug dealers, which are pharmaceutical companies, many of them private because they make so much money, like the family in Connecticut who sells OxyContin. Well, here's a new wave of insanity, the zombification of the American population. And you can't read this and think that something horrible is going wrong. Here is the headline. It's not just New Haven, mass K2 overdose, symptom of national crisis. At least 95 people in New Haven overdosed on the drug in 2 days as similar events become more common across the U.S. They call it a mass rapid fire overdose event. 95 people overdosed in New Haven, Connecticut on K2, which is a synthetic marijuana. They all passed out in the green, the New Haven Green, right outside Yale University, one of the most prestigious Ivy League universities in America, where many of our presidents attend school there. And it was a mass, scary horror, it's a horror film, right? That's a classic scene from a horror film that people are just dropping. They call it falling out.
Well, what I thought of immediately was, I won't digress too lengthily at this moment, but Dmitry Orlov's essay, The Collapse Gap. And when the Soviet Union collapsed because of U.S. meddling and Boris Yeltsin and all that going on, they had this skyrocketing in alcoholism and social catastrophe. And here in the U.S., because you've had this enormous financial re-engineering to take all the money being printed and put it in the pockets of a few folks and leave the vast majority in a state of zombification. This is the collapse gap he was talking about. The U.S. and the Soviet Union both collapsed in the 1989-1990 period. It's taken the U.S., as he describes it, longer to realize that collapse. But for the same reasons and for the same kind of political machinations, we're seeing the same results.
Yeah, in the Soviet Union, when they collapsed, the institutions around you collapsed. And you notice that the mainstream media will project the concerns of the elite, and the elite often say that they explain Russiagate as getting the American population to not trust the institutions around them. And I think what you're seeing is, there's the institutions around them, their entire society, the fabric of their society has abandoned them. But it hasn't been as obvious and dramatic. Like since the financial crisis, you could actually see this situation from 2000. So from the crash of 2000, basically ever since then, not only have incomes declined, but rapidly, but the wealth and income gap from 2000 really went out of control, spiraled up to the top. And something happened from that crash, from how they dealt with it, from the Federal Reserve, this is for a bigger topic for a
the drawbridge came up, and whoever was it on the inside is now left in the front of Yale University having a spontaneous zombification event courtesy of the pharmaceutical corporation.
And it's just so appropriate that Yale is one of the primary institutions of elite power. So that's basically, you either have to go to Yale or Harvard, and those two control so much of the fabric of our power centers. So right outside Yale. And they also mention, and this has been covered, but it's still shocking to see these numbers. In 2017, drug overdoses killed nearly 200 people in America per day, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, data released this week, a new record driven by the deadly opioid epidemic. Since K2 was first detected in the U.S. in 2008, clusters of overdose outbreaks have become more and more common. About 56 people overdosed from K2 in Brooklyn in May, 100 overdosed in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania in July 2017, and 40 people overdosed in Dallas, Texas in May 2014. So there aren't as many deaths from this K2, but what happens is they have mass hallucinations, and they turn into like zombies and they just fall over in the middle of a intersection.
Like those shows we see coming out of Hollywood, The Walking Dead, or various zombie movies, various horror movies. The popular culture is reflecting the zeitgeist of the zombification of the American population and cashing in on the box office while the pharmaceuticals cash in at the cash register, while the politicians cash in on insider trading, while the media cashes in on high ratings. But unfortunately, nobody in the real economy is cashing in. They're all going bankrupt.
And here again, like, we're in this crisis situation of the institutions failing the American population, or a great majority of them. The elites are concerned. They recognize that the population does not have faith in the institutions. And yet they're having faith in all sorts of stuff. In fact, that comes into this next paragraph, because they're saying that, you know, it's a synthetic cannabinoid, however you pronounce that, a marijuana. But importantly, they said it's the mix of different concentrations of other drugs that whoever the maker is puts in these. And they say, despite the mystery of each batch, K2 is appealing to drug users because its cost is low, its chemicals aren't detected on standard drug tests that they might have to take at work, and its changing mixtures make law enforcement efforts more complicated than with purer drugs such as marijuana. So despite the mystery of what they're about to take, they're willing to take that. They're willing to believe fake news. They're willing to take a synthetic marijuana. They're willing to take in anything that might dull their pain.
Yeah, just a mystery substance. They're imbibing. It's a lottery to oblivion, and as an escape from the reality that their institutions, their American institutions, have turned them into chattel, human chattel. I think that's the right word.
Yeah. Well, it's a great article because there's loads of quotes about how terrifying it was and all these people dropping all at the same time. You know, you're just on a stroll through the public green, the public space is a public area, and people are just dropping as you're walking.
I don't want to, get too, controversial and whatnot, but I mean, this has been going on in the poor neighborhoods for quite some time.
Yeah.
What makes this newsworthy is that, Yale University, that's not a poor neighborhood. That's a rich neighborhood. That's what makes it suddenly newsworthy. And that's why they call it like spontaneous, overwhelming cannabis syndrome. But up until recently, it would just be called nodding out in the hood, and nobody would care because those folks were already marginalized. Meanwhile, in Chicago, where the advanced stages of this are taking place, you've got wholesale slaughter going on with murder rates skyrocketing. That's the next step.
Well, here we have the people falling out, as they call it now, and the dean of the Yale School of Public Health, Stan Verman, said, "My fear is that the synthetic cannabinoids might be a new wave. It's occupying the fire department, the emergency room at Yale. You can imagine the pain and suffering of the patient's family, on the patients themselves. It's quite a big burden on a small city. It would be a big burden in a big city." Remember, these are public health. You have to treat these people because they might be dying, and the Yale University Medical School, which is one of the best in the entire United States, very expensive. The city has to pay for it, the taxpayer has to pay for it. So here we have this crazy situation.
Yeah, and who are these taxpayers paying for this? Oh, the Obamacare care folks are paying full boat like me. Oh, you mean I'm supporting like 1,000 cannabinoid addicted losers outside Yale? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, this is a general taxpayer. And this is important to note because this is going into my final headline here, which ties to the first one, where you're seeing the bombs drop in Yemen, linked to Lockheed Martin, linked to General Dynamics, linked to Raytheon. Here, big media companies are branching into healthcare. Here's why. And they point to Comcast. Remember where Rachel Maddow works? Remember Comcast Cares? Well, because of this sort of huge profits, because remember because we say we're capitalists, and so we can't fix any prices, but we could force everybody to buy these prices where there's no limit to how much is going to cost you to walk into Yale University Medical School. You and I could never go into Yale Medical, into the emergency room, because we would be stuck with a $100,000 bill just for walking in there, right? Somebody who passes out without any health insurance in the Yale Green, well, they're going to be treated, and the taxpayer is going to pay for it. So our taxes will pay for that. But here you see these media companies. You see all sorts of telecom, all the oligopolies that run the media, that run the telecoms. They're that run the internet. So Google, Facebook, these people are getting into the healthcare, this racket of a system that we have, like Obamacare, like this no cap to the Medicaid costs, like they're getting in on it. So they're pouring into it. And that leaves the question of, is it going to take all those years that CNN, that loves war, they love the countdown to war, right? It took them all these years to finally say who's benefiting from it. Are they going to cover this health crisis in America if they're profiting from it?
No, they won't. Comcast, obviously, one of the evil corporations out there in the media space.
Comcast cares.
The Comcast cares. They'll put like a camera into people's kidney and then have a cop show about watching people's kidneys get stolen live on air. And because they're addicted to synthetic opiates, but they won't do anything to stop it. So they've taken the idea of gruesomely, pornographically watching America disintegrate and making a huge payday on that. Comcast and Saturday Night Live and Lorne Michaels and all those guys. Thanks, buddy. You're killing us. Great job. Well, we'll be back after the break, so don't go away. Much more coming your way.